No surrender, no defeat. Maybe it's time for an Evercade retreat.
Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. My name is Gene Joke and today I'm ranking and reviewing all the games from the Data East Arcade Collection 2 for the Evercade. The first Data East Arcade Collection is one of my favourite arcade collections on the Evercade. Actually, it's one of my favourite collections. It was also one of the ones that came with my first VS, so it was one of the very first ones I played. Actually, I think it was the very first kart I played. So in a sense, you could say I have nostalgia for something nostalgic. Whatever. But, obviously the real question is, can this live up to the first collection? And, I knew right away from when it was announced that it would be hard for it to do that. I hoped that Super Real Darwin would be a significant improvement on Darwin. I thought Edward Randy looked pretty cool. I wondered if Midnight Resistance would control okay, knowing that the arcade version had a rotary system. I also wondered how Crude Buster would compare to Two Crude Dudes, as I'd only ever played the Mega Drive version, which was on Data East Red. And seeing that it included a bunch of the early Data East games, the Data East or Deco cassette games, I wondered how well those would have aged. So, the question is, how did it do overall?
Number 12.
Peter Pepper's Ice Cream Factory. This is a sequel to Burger Time, or at least I think it was a sequel. I'm pretty sure this came second. Although you wouldn't think about it, it kind of, this to me looks worse than the first game. You've got bigger sprites and things like that, and it's a bit more colourful in some ways, but it's lost all the charm. In fact, this kind of looks like a C64 game. Unfortunately, the bad doesn't stop there. I think the basic ideas behind it, the sort of throwing the ice cream onto scoops or dropping it on there, and there's some interesting mechanics at play. However, just the first level, the speed of the enemies and how relentlessly they are, and how you can only really avoid them by jumping. The game doesn't feel intuitive. It doesn't feel like it actually pick up and play that arcade games really need. When you first try it, you end up dying without really understanding the game. It takes you a bit of effort to learn, even with having read the instructions. Or maybe that's just me being thick. This game was one of the delays in me getting around to reviewing this kart, because I played it and I actually hated it. I had no real desire to persevere with it and keep trying to feel like I'd given it a good, a really good shot to say, yeah, this game sucks or not. And as it is, I have managed to beat the first level. Basically I get bored before I even finish the second. I say bored, I end up dying, and the game just doesn't do anything to make me want to keep playing it. The speed of the enemies is the biggest sin it commits, especially on the first level. Further on when it gets more challenging, fine, but as it is, it's just, we've had like a warm-up level and eased you into the difficulty and, really kind of got you started. Maybe it'd be a bit more fun, but I don't know, it just doesn't work.
Number 11.
This is B-Wings, a vertically scrolling shoot-'em-up, once again a Deco cassette game. Visually, it's okay, it's functional, I suppose. Sounds are actually kind of ugly, or they're not the most pleasant things on the ears. Gameplay-wise, it's got some interesting elements. The ducking to avoid enemies and things like that is quite cool, quite novel. And the upgrades, the power-ups, the way you get these sort of extra wings and how they can be damaged and make you sort of drag and things are quite interesting. Some of the power-ups are pretty good. However, it just doesn't quite come together. It's a difficult game. The recent edition of dip switches really helps here. You can put infinite lives on it, which means you can get through the game, because otherwise it's one continue and you're done. And you only get so many lives, and there are a lot of levels. I think it's 50 levels on this game, and it takes quite a while to get through, and honestly by the time you get to level 10 you'd have had more than enough of this game anyway. By then it's showing pretty much all it has to offer. You get some different graphics and more intense levels and everything, but really it's not really adding anything new. My general journey with this game was, at first I thought it was a bit too difficult and awkward. I didn't really like it. Then I started to learn it and quite enjoyed it and found some of the quirks of it and really found it interesting. But I didn't enjoy it overly, and then of course it starts outstaying its welcome. Overall, it's not bad, it's just nothing really special at all.
Number 10.
SRD, or Super Real Darwin, is the sequel to Darwin 4078 that was on Data East Arcade 1. I didn't really like that game. I liked the ideas behind it, and there's some things I thought were novel. However, the size of your ship, how easy it was to die, the backgrounds where often you couldn't see the enemies or the bullets, and general enemy patterns I found rather annoying. And everything, and I mean everything about that game, is present here. Actually, I lied, not everything. The music isn't quite as irritating. And the backgrounds in general are more bland, which in some ways is a good thing, in some ways a bad thing. And really, I think I like this maybe slightly less than the previous Darwin, maybe slightly more, I'm not sure. It's a shame because the whole power-up system, getting your DNA and evolving your ship is fantastic. Unfortunately, just the level design and enemy patterns really make it difficult, and even with dip switches, wasn't really much more fun making things easier. So yeah, it's a frustrating game, and I rated it above B-Wings because B-Wings was basic and the moment-to-moment gameplay wasn't quite as good, whereas Super Darwin has a lot of the good elements. They're just frustrating in how they come together. Overall, it's passable as far as shoot 'em ups go, just frustrating and disappointing because I really hoped it would be a significant improvement on the previous one. My mistake, I suppose.
Number 9.
It almost pains me to do this, but I have to put Midnight Resistance here. I say pains me because I really like Midnight Resistance. It's a game I've got a lot of nostalgia for. Played it in the arcade a bit as well, where it has the rotary system for the controls, and it just doesn't convert well here at all. Using the shoulder buttons to rotate your direction of fire would be okay if it wasn't a bit too sensitive and you end up turning too far and it becomes clumsy to play, or at least I haven't been able to get used to doing it. I managed to play through the game, but it was awkward and I was having to sort of compensate, and shame they couldn't have used the face buttons to effectively use those like a twin stick shooter, assign jump to a shoulder button. But I guess that wasn't possible, or they didn't think about it, I don't know. I'm sure that would have made it much more playable and probably would have put it at the top of the ranking. Otherwise, I'd say it's a good run and gun with some cool power-ups and bosses and everything. I really like the music, and yeah, it's just a shame that it didn't really convert control-wise. So yeah, here it is.
Number 8.
Is Super Burger Time. This sequel to Burger Time, or whatever sequel, there's a few of these games now. I don't know how many others came out before this, but anyway, that's beside the point. It's a Burger Time sequel, and it's apparently super, only I don't think it's all that super. Control Peter Pepper's son, Peter Pepper Jr., and you have to make burgers much like his father did in the first game, only this time you have to jump on the parts of the burger repeatedly to make them drop. Otherwise the basic mechanics are pretty similar, but it doesn't feel as good. Visually it is sort of an upgrade, but it's also kind of ugly. Have bosses and there's more levels and everything, but it's lost something by becoming more and adding to it. They've lost the purity and the compelling gameplay of the first game. It's fine, but for a single screen platformer or elimination platformer or whatever you'd want to call this, better examples of the genre on the Evercade. Plenty of them. Even another better one on this collection. Number 7. Trio the Punch, Never Forget Me. It's a beat 'em up and has some fairly nice graphics in some ways, but also pretty basic in others. And it's it's Kosoge, which, if you're not familiar, is basically Japanese for shit game, I believe. Don't quote me on that because, I don't know Japanese, but that's what I've read on the internet, so it must be true. But anyway, that aside, it's an absolutely bonkers game. There's, I think, about 35 short levels, and essentially they come down to beating things up, but as they mix it up quite a bit, and like I said, it is absolutely bonkers. It's absolutely worth a playthrough at least once to see its entirety, see all the levels. 3 characters to choose from, they're all fairly different. Mechanically the game is not very solid, the attacks can be awkward and generally doesn't feel that good to play. And it really is the character and the bizarreness of this game that carries it. If you're talking in gameplay terms, it's actually pretty rubbish. Being turned into a sheep, or battling a boss that's based on Colonel Sanders and have him explode into some sort of mutant chicken that throws chicken drumsticks at you. Yeah, pretty amusing. Like I said, not a great game, but worth a playthrough at least once.
Number 6.
Is Crude Buster. Mega Drive port of this game, Two Crude Dudes, was on the Data East Red, and personally I think that is the better version. This arcade original version has better graphics. Aesthetically it is improved all round really. Well, not improved because it was downgraded to the other version, but you get my drift. All gameplay and controls are largely the same, although I did find the Mega Drive version seemed a little bit more responsive than this one. It's just controlled a bit more tight, so I can't really put my finger on it exactly what it is, but it definitely feels better to play. And really lets this version down. It's twofold really. One is there's a lot more voice in the game, which you'd think would be a good thing, but when your character gets knocked down, he falls on the ground, he shakes his head and goes, "Oh, what a day." And you'll hear that a lot because the game is tough. Obviously arcade hard to make you munch quarters. Enemies will knock you down a lot and overpower you. I'd say the difficulty of it just made it less fun than it should be, and it became, felt like a chore to play. Mega Drive port gets a little bit repetitive after a while, but it's exacerbated here. Using the dip switches, you can make it easier, which does make it more enjoyable, and that's why it's ranked up here. If I'd ranked this before the dip switches were added, this would be further down the list. Revisiting it on easy, I did have more fun with it. I found it a bit more enjoyable to play. But even so, it gets tiresome after a while. Shame, I found it a little bit disappointing as I've never played this version before, but yeah, what can you do?
Number 5.
Is Express Raider. This is a side-scrolling sort of action-adventure, I suppose. Control a cowboy outlaw raiding the express train, trying to steal, money and what have you, which is obviously just represented by money bags. The action varies between being on foot, jumping on the train, fighting through the guards, I suppose, and stealing the money, and side-scrolling shooting bits where you're on horseback shooting people on the train and, trying to stop it that way. Being a slightly older arcade game, the age does show. You have, as you're fist fighting these various enemies, essentially you'll walk along a bit, maybe dodge or jump a couple of bits, you'll fight an enemy, then you'll move on to the next bit. The actual combat itself is quite interesting. Essentially, as you attack enemies or take hits, that's how your health is worked out, giving you sort of a benefit. Basically the better you do, the better you will do. It did take me a minute to get into this game. My first impression was rather negative, but once I did take the time to, get used to how the combat worked, I actually found myself really enjoying it, and it went from being one of my least favourite games on the collection to being actually one of the more enjoyable ones overall. It's a fun little old school arcade action game. Worth a second look if you sort of, bounced off it when you first tried it, like I did.
Number 4.
Is Shootout. This is a sort of third-person gallery shooter, if you like, and like Express Raider before, this is one you might bounce off a bit at first. It's fairly simplistic. Run and shoot your way through the single screen bits, shooting at the enemies, avoiding the pedestrians. Fairly straightforward stuff. I mean, it really is the definition of a shooting gallery. Unlike Express Raider, there's a certain charm to the sort of fairly old school graphics. There's some of the garish colours used and things. It screams its era, and yeah, again, I had a lot of fun with this one, more than I expected to. Certainly worth persevering with and getting used to how the shooting mechanics and learning the game. You have a lot more fun that way. Yeah, quite a pleasant surprise.
Number 3.
Is Edward Randy, or The Cliffhanger, or The Cliffhanger Edward Randy. It's had various titles, whatever. Anyway, this is a very sort of Indiana Jones inspired, arcade action game. Control Edward Randy as he fights off the forces of the Dark Ogre, or whatever it's called, and trying to stop some weapon of mass destruction. Who really cares what the plot is? This is all about the bang bang bang. Although the core gameplay mostly stays the same with you running, jumping and whipping, essentially the way the levels are presented does vary. 1 minute you'll be on the side of a ship, or you'll be on a boat fighting off enemies, or being run down by a car, what have you. It's like I say, there is a variety to it, although the main gameplay stays the same. It is some very over the top action with lots of sort of scaling effects and things, and yeah, I had a blast with this one. It's not one I think I'd play through all that often, but again, I just really enjoyed the kind of the action movie experience that this game provides. Visually and sonically it is impressive as well, and much in the way of negatives about this, beyond the fact that it's probably one you'd only play through the once. Play it for the spectacle, but maybe you come back every so often.
Number 2.
Is Joe and Mac Returns. This sequel to Joe and Mac, or second sequel, whatever it is, changes things up and makes it an elimination platformer. Essentially, this is more like Tumble Pop 2. It's just been given a Joe and Mac facelift. I like Tumble Pop a lot. It's one of my favourite games of this genre on the Evercade. This a sort of semi kind of a sequel, or spiritual sequel. It's good. There's really not much to complain about. It's got some really nice graphics. The gameplay is fun, although some of the voices do get a little bit annoying. I mean, when you've heard
I've got a power up
about for the 1,000th time or something, it starts to grow thin. I'd say it's almost as good as Tumble Pop, but there's just something about it. I don't know if it's almost like the execution, the coding, the tightness of the controls, and the hit detection of the enemies, but something didn't quite work for me quite as much as it does for Tumble Pop. But it's close. In all honesty, if it hadn't been so similar in feel to Tumble Pop, this might have ranked as my favourite game on the collection, but it didn't because it just felt very familiar to that game, despite the facelift. Ultimately, if I want to play something this much like Tumble Pop, I might as well just play Tumble Pop, because I do think it is the better of the two games. And finally, coming in at
number 1.
Is Last Mission, and I imagine a lot of people will disagree with this one. It is a top-down, multi-directional shoot-'em-up where you control some space soldier who is apparently fighting to get his honour back on some last mission. Who really cares? Again, it's a shoot-'em-up. It scrolls 8 directions. You have a map area for each stage. You have to fly your way around there, taking out enemy bases and encampments. You take out these, I suppose, like to say them all, the bases rather than the ships, and you'll get power-ups. And essentially, you just have to cause lots of destruction. Everything, you build up the meter down at the bottom on the star meter until that's full, and then the boss will appear. You fire that off, and then you go to the next level, which will have a different background, but essentially it's more of the same over and over. And I'm not sure what it is about this game, but I just find it very compelling, and I just keep coming back to it. Again, it's one I can see it being one that I come back to a lot, as it's just a fun arcade bash. It's pretty good visually. I mean, it's of its era, but it looks fairly good. But yeah, I just find it's one I really keep coming back to for a bit of a blast here and there. I really enjoy this game. I do think many people would rank this lower. I think in some cases other people have talked about this cartridge and they have said it's one of their lesser favourite games, or like mid-tier. But yeah, it's my favourite on the collection by quite a margin, or at least the one I've played the most and I've wanted to keep coming back to more than any other.
Final opinion.
As a whole, I think it's a pretty good collection, but I do understand why a number of people have found it very disappointing compared to the first Data East arcade. Actually, being that the first is my favourite cartridges, this one doesn't live up to it. Releasing alongside Turplan collections, it was easy for this one to kind of seem less impressive, by association, if you like. Initial reaction to this cartridge was fairly negative, and it's only coming back to this to make this video and kind of making the effort to finish every game and put proper time into it that I've actually really started to appreciate it. But there's no getting away from it. There are a few games that don't really hit the mark, or that aren't really going to appeal to everyone. It does feel that it's missing a tentpole title, something that would really sort of stand out. But there are 12 games here, which is quite a lot for an arcade collection. Definitely a couple of games here that are worth a play. I suppose what also hurts it a little bit is you've got 2 repeats from the Data East Red collection, and in both cases the home versions were superior. If anyone from Blaze watches this, if there's a way you can tweak the controls on Midnight Resistance, maybe to like say the twin stick style thing like on Xenocrisis with bumper for jump, please do it. I don't know if it's possible, but it's got to be better than the rotation thing that's in place. And I'll give the Data East Arcade Collection 2 a score of 7 out of 10. And I think that's everything, so like usual, I'll end this video with a silly song based on one of the games, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video.
So strange where logic breaks and patterns change. 3 odd heroes take the stage to battle through an arcade age. Trio the punch, let's roll the dice, when nothing ever seems precise. A tough guy, a ninja, and a barbarian, fighting through a world of endless fright. Frogs rain down, weirdest bosses all around. A desert here, a jungle there, chaos rules but we don't care. Trio the punch, let's roll the dice, when nothing ever seems precise. A tough guy, a ninja, and a barbarian, fighting through a world of endless fright. Punching, jumping high, fighting fire, breathing Buddha, and exploding Colonel Saunders and his killer flying chicken legs. Trio the punch, a fever dream, when logic cracks at every seam. So guy, say it loud. Say it proud. wobble, but they don't fall down.